out for our second millage rate public hearing in the absence of our mayor, Honorable Khalid, and in the absence of our mayor pro tem. We are going to get started with our millage rate public hearing for Wednesday, August 16th, 10 a.m. Mr. Clerk, will you please sound the roll?
It's a roll call for today's meeting. The Honorable Captain Earth Rao, District 1.
Present.
The Honorable Carmelita Gums, District 2. The Honorable Helen Z. Willis, District 3.
Present.
The Honorable J.C. Sebastian, District 4.
Present.
The Honorable Corey A. Reeves, District 5. The Honorable Natasha Williams-Brown will be absent today. And the Honorable Linda B. Pritchett, District 7.
Present.
And as mentioned, Honorable Mayor Khalid is not present. Madam Presiding Officer, you do have a quorum.
Thank you. I call the meeting to order. Can you please first sound the first item on the agenda?
First item on this morning's agenda is the millage rate presentation. Will be presented by the Interim City Manager, Sharon D. Subadan.
Good morning. Is my microphone on?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you, everyone. So this will be our second millage rate hearing for the 2023 tax millage rate. Next slide. I want to start with a property tax 101. This is a repeat of last week's presentation. The tax rate, the millage rate is the tax rate applied to the assessed value of taxable property to calculate the amount of property tax to be paid. It's usually stated in dollars per thousand. So for example, a millage rate of 1 mil is $1 per thousand of assessed value. For our calculation purposes, the rate is stated in 3 decimal places, 0.001 for a dollar, for example. The millage rate is assessed every year and established every year by the levying authority, which in our case is the tax commissioner, and assessments are performed by the tax assessor. Next slide, please. So the market value is the current estimated amount at which a property can be bought or sold. The assessed value in Georgia is 40% of the market value, and that's used as a basis for calculating the property tax bill in Georgia, the levy. So for example, if a market value of a parcel of real estate is $100,000, its corresponding assessed value for calculation purposes is $40,000. And that's the example on the screen. And as I shared earlier, 0.001 would be one mil, and would result in this example in an annual property tax levy of $40 for 1 mil. Oftentimes you hear about homestead exemptions. Homestead exemption is a legal provision that reduces the amount of property tax and for owner-occupied homes. These are established by state law and voted on by the citizens of a given city, county, or school district. And while all homeowners in the city of South Fulton qualify for basic homestead exemption if you're owner-occupied, next slide, please. Different exemptions are applicable for property owners by the Fulton County Schools and Fulton County, and there are many different reasons for exemptions. For example, seniors, those with disabilities or full medical disabilities. There's exemptions for veterans and their spouses. More recently, exemptions have been extended to spouses of surviving peace officers. And many of these exemptions are based on requirements for age and income. Next slide, please, Corey. If anybody has any questions about that, that would be a question for the tax assessor. But this is an example of the types of exemptions that are permitted in the city of South Fulton and in Fulton County. As you can see, the majority are related to seniors in our community. And to clarify, these total exemptions are not persons, but are actually properties. So with all of our, in addition to homestead, all of the different types of exemptions that are available amount to 23,000 properties in the city. The assessed value of these exemptions is 2.5 billion. That's billion with a B, and that's the value of the properties. The value of the taxes, which, as I explained before, is a reduced amount, is 32 million. So that is a reduction in our actual income, if you will, that comes to us from our tax, ad valorem tax revenue. And ad valorem is just another way of describing property tax. So this slide is the meat of the matter. What is the value of all real property? 6.075-521-080 is billion. In addition to that, we have personal property tax, motor vehicle tax, no timber tax in the city, and there's also taxes on heavy equipment. It's important to understand that real property is not all homestead. They're not all homes. A very large percentage of that is coming from our commercial-based tax rate, and our gross digest is 7.3 billion, meaning that's the value of property in all these categories in the city of South Fulton, less the exemptions, which we showed you on a previous slide. Our net digest is 4.8 billion. Next slide, please. And so the millage rate is going to be proposed in the city's budget and in these hearings to be at the same rate as it was for 2022, which is 12.89. So to be clear, we are not seeking, or I am not suggesting or proposing an increase in the millage rate. We're proposing to keep the millage rate the same. However, as explained before, the taxable value has increased. That increase is as a result of increased property value. So as we know, just by watching the real estate market in the last 5 years, we've seen steady increases in the rates of the value of property, both commercial and residential, have increased. So applying the current year's millage rate to the increased property value results in a net increase. By Georgia law, anytime there is an increase in the amount of taxable revenue for real estate and ad valorem, we have to advertise it as a tax increase. This is language that can be very confusing, but this is language given to us by the state, and it's required that we advertise it that way. So in order to help citizens to understand, we have to advertise what's called the rollback rate. The rollback rate is what the tax millage would be if we had no increase in the net revenue that we get from ad valorem tax. The rollback rate for calendar year 23 is 11.439. That is a difference of 1.46, resulting in a net, applied to our net digest of 4.8 billion, results in a dollar amount of that rollback being $7 million. That does not include any reduction for appeals and or under collections. So this is an example. Again, the state requires that we explain to the public in plain language what the difference in the proposed millage rate and the rollback rate is. And in this instance, they always ask us to use $175,000, which we know tends to be on the low side in our city. But on a fair market value home of $175,000, you take a reduction of 40% as allowed by Georgia law, which reduces the assessed value to $70,000. Your local homestead exemption, if this is a owner-occupied home, is $30,000. It is a flat rate, it's not a percentage, whether your home is worth $175,000 or $1.7 million, everybody gets the same homestead exemption, $30,000, if you're owner-occupied. That reduces the taxable value to $40,000. The rollback millage rate of 0.11439, which is what it would be if we rolled back and did not collect any additional taxes over last year, is $457.56. If we do not roll back, we hold the millage rate the same at 0.12899. It would be $515.96, a difference of $58.40 per year. That's a little bit over $1 a week. Next slide, please. So we wanted to provide some additional examples. Sorry, one more slide, please. Nope, not that one. Can you go back? No. All right, maybe it's further along. Next slide. I think this is the old presentation. All right, I can read it from here. Go back one more. Sorry about that. And so when you take the net digest and you, which is 4.8 billion, you apply the current millage, it's an amount of 61,922,000. If you do the rollback rate, you'll see it is a net of 54,913,000, and that's where the difference between the two is the 7 million. Next slide. For your information, I've provided increments of what the millage rate, increments of the millage rate rollback would be. So if there was a quarter mil, it would be 1.2, half a mil, 2.4, a 3/4 of a mil, 3.6, and so on. One of the examples that I provided last week, which I feel compelled to provide it again since we did that last week, is we took two other examples, one of which was using a fair market value of $320,000, which is more average for our community. Again, doing a reduction of 40%, it resulted in an assessed value of $128,000. In this instance, we applied a couple of other local exemptions besides the homestead. So the homestead is $30,000. Like I said, regardless of the value of your house, $30,000 is the homestead exemption for owner-occupied homes. But we put two other exemptions in this example. One of them was for age-based, and another one was for age-based for schools, each of which are $10,000, resulting in a taxable value of $78,000. And this presentation is available, and we will have it uploaded on the website with these examples, because this is what we did last week, and we want to make sure that we're consistent. I know, because for some reason we have our presentations are out of sync. I'm not sure what happened there. But I want to explain it since I explained it last week. In that example, of a $320,000 home, the difference would be $113 a year between the existing rate and the rollback rate. If we took out those two exemptions, one $10,000 for age-based and and school-based, the difference would be $143 a year between the rollback rate and the current rate. Which, again, sorry this is not displaying on your screen, but we'll make sure we get that rectified. And so in just wrapping up, the proposal is not to increase the tax rate. It is recognized that the base assessed value has gone up, and that results in additional income. Part of the reason that it is like that is because everybody's property taxes, property values have increased. I don't really know of anyone who can say their property taxes, their property value has not increased at all. Part of the reason we are proposing no increase is because, just like everyone else has increased expenses, the city has increased expenses. Inflation is hitting us hard too. It costs more for us to operate the government. It costs more for us to complete projects. It costs more for us to attract talent and pay employees. It costs more for us to complete the projects and to deliver the services that the community expects from us and that this council has committed to, and this administration has promised to implement. So in presenting the millage and in presenting the budget, we have not recommended an increase and we've not recommended a rollback. At the end of the day, the decision is the council's. I make recommendations based on the weight of my experience. So thank you, and I'm now subject to your questions.
All right, thank you, Madam City Manager, for another excellent presentation. We will now entertain questions. The queue is open. I see in the queue District 7 Councilwoman Linda Pritchett.
Thank you for recognizing me. Can you hear me? Madam City Manager, on page 9 of the presentation, you talk about the heavy-duty equipment and what's collected, I guess taxes that are collected or revenues are collected with regards to that. Who actually evaluates that, or who assesses that?
That's a tax assessor. For more specifics on that, generally my understanding is that is heavy equipment that is owned by large companies, construction companies, heavy-duty equipment operators, and dealerships. But we can certainly get you more specific information. But all assessments are done by the tax assessor, and all levies are done by the tax commissioner in all categories.
Thank you. I yield.
All right, the chair recognizes Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam City Manager, thanks much for your presentation. I was trying to find some historical data, and again, I know you just got here, but I couldn't find our five-year report. So at some point in time, I would love for us to update that and put it out to the public. It's updated up to 2021, I see on our website. So if I missed it, someone tells me, but I couldn't find one.
I'll check into it. I know that when we advertise the millage rate, we do a 5-year look back, and it shows you every year what the millage rate is. You should also know, this is a little technical, but you should also know as our sales tax increases, there is a reduction that happens against, it's called the M&O reduction, that happens against our real taxes. And you will see when you look at the 5-year history that because our tax increase, our sales tax increases, our M&O, it's called M&O, is reduced. But there is a 5-year history that's advertised when the millage rate is advertised, and I can share that with you.
Okay, and I doing some additional research, because listen, I fully understand our needs, as I've been saying in these meetings. We have a lot of needs. But I really wanted to look back for myself on the history. That's one of the reasons I was trying to find that document. And one of the things I came across, which for me again was a little bit striking, was before we became a city, I think we had the 4th highest millage rate of the cities, and the SSD back then. And it looks like now we're number 2 in terms of our level of millage rate. That's why I keep lobbying for us to take another look. The 0.5 mil is $2 million, and as I keep telling everyone, let's see if we find it. But I'm probably fighting a losing battle there. But I just wanted to point that out, that I was looking at a lot of historical data to make sure what I was asking for is not being unreasonable. So I'll just leave that comment there.
All right, did you have a response, City Manager? No? All right, Dr. Rao?
Thank you. I have a couple questions and maybe a suggestion. I think the information that is shared about our tax exemptions is significant because, you know, I've answered some questions over the last couple of weeks about, you know, what people feel they're not getting from the city of South Fulton. And most people don't realize most cities don't give an additional exemption that we do, which is additional $30,000, and in addition to all these things. And one other thing, I remember our financial consultant made it really clear that a meal and the value of the tax digest varies from city to city. So you can't just say 12% in the city of South Fulton is the same as, say, Roswell, because they have to take into account all the value of their commercial, industrial, residential, everything together. So just looking at 2 cities with the same millage rate, they don't mean the same values. So you can't say it's the second highest because you don't know what the basis is of their entire tax digest. Could you speak to the difference between the two just for the benefit of the public?
Absolutely. So as I explained, the value of the digest is based on the value of the assessed property. So while our average might be right around 320, in other jurisdictions that may be considerably higher. While we have a pretty decent commercial and industrial tax base, others have a significantly higher industrial tax base that carries with it a significant amount of property value, and as a result, even a lower millage rate may result in a higher net value in terms of dollars. And so that's a very important distinction to make and to understand. And while, you know, let's say the average house in another jurisdiction is $600,000 and ours is $300,000, it still costs us the same amount of money to provide police and fire services. So a fire truck in our jurisdiction is not half the cost of that same piece of apparatus in a jurisdiction where the property value is twice as high. And so we still have the same expenditures as everyone else, even though the value of our digest may be lower.
Thank you for that, because again, a lot of people say, oh, their rate is 12% and ours is 4%. I was like, it doesn't mean that you can't compare the two. Every city is going to be unique because their digest is different. So I just wanted that for the benefit of the public. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rao. And just to amplify her point, I was going to ask if it would be possible to generate an infographic that showed that. I'm thinking about, it could be whatever cities you all deem are the most relevant, but I often hear comparisons between us and Peachtree City and us and Sandy Springs. And if we could just show like the average value of a 4-bedroom home and what they pay in taxes, what they do or do not get in tax exemptions, I think it would be great for an apple-to-apples comparison that is simple for everyday folks. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Pritchett for her second time.
Thank you again. Madam City Manager, in your analysis of a comparison that you show the difference between what the recommended millage rate is in comparison to the rollback rate. And here you show that it's a difference of $58.40. So is that true that we're talking about a difference? If we went with the rollback, it would only be a difference of $58.40 annually to this property owner taxpayer, which is really less, which is really, if you break it down monthly, $4.87 a month. So what we're really talking about here, when people are asking, you know, for the city to do something because people are experiencing hardships, although we recognize, you know, inflation and all the other hardships that we're all experiencing, we're actually talking about $4.87 a month difference in what you are recommending. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. I yield.
All right, the chair recognizes Councilman Sebastian, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you. And also comparing the city to city and the misinformation about we have the highest millage rate. Again, it was mentioned that we offer, if you go back to, can you go back to the exemption slide? So when we exempt our values, or when we exempt the revenue, somebody has to pay for them. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
So you can have anything, but you can't have everything. And so if you're taking a reduction, it means that there are either things that we can't do, or others have to assume that expense.
And so I would say that while we are comparing, we're not comparing apples to apples. If you look at other cities who have lower exemption rates, not only in some cases they have higher property values or more commercial, but we need to look at how many exemptions they offer. Because these exemptions, I guarantee you, are not offered in other municipalities. In some municipalities, they don't even offer senior exemptions. And so I just will caution people for comparing us to other municipalities, because I would say that in the city of South Fulton, you know, the average senior that is 62 above is paying very minimum to no taxes based on the exemptions that we allow in this municipality. And if they go to other municipalities, they're not only getting the exemptions, but they're paying higher sanitation costs. I yield.
All right, the chair recognizes Councilman Sebastian for his second time.
I don't normally pull out qualifications, but let me just inform my colleagues up here that even though it's a bachelor's degree, my degree is in statistical analysis, okay? I fully well understand the difference between the structure of the digest, say, for Sandy Springs versus a South Fulton. The point that I really wanted to drive home with that comment is that before we were collecting a penny in local option sales tax, which we saw from the information that we presented, now represents about 26% of our revenue. Before we collected 1 penny, before we became a city, we had the 4th highest millage rate in the region, right? We cannot say that there is absolutely zero comparison, because when you leave the city of South Fulton and go into Fairburn, you automatically, the value of the property don't automatically drop off by that much because you cross a border and go into Fairburn. Believe you me, I get it. The structure of the digest, the structure of the economies of the cities are different. But again, my point is, we had a millage rate coming into, I believe it's 2018, of 11.579. In 2020, we raised that millage rate to 12.899. So if we can have a millage rate that was the 4th highest before we collected 1 penny of local option sales tax. In other words, we weren't getting any sales tax at all under the SSD. Forget the other cities. All I am saying now is that we should not dismiss the idea of giving citizens back some money. I get it. We have a lot of things to do in this city. And I'm not upset with whatever the council decides to do. Whatever decision we make as a group, we make as a group. We own it. But I was elected not to be a yes person. I was elected to have dialogue and debate over things, and if I see a difference of opinion, I would offer it. It is not a deception or misinformation to say what it is. Use the data however you want to use the data. It's there. So, again, I would say I am not in favor, as we have kept the millage rate the same, I am not in favor of doing that. But if we decide that the majority up here vote to do that, then so be it. And that's all I have to say.
The chair recognizes Councilwoman Willis for her second time.
Respectfully, I would say that on this diocese, we have very highly educated individuals. We have a city manager that's highly educated and has 35 years of municipal experience. And I respect her recommendations and her analysis. We have a person that's on this diocese that has a doctoral. Most of us on this diocese, I would say, I know Councilmember Gums and I, we both have advanced master's degrees. And both of my degrees are in accounting. But I learned most of my information about municipal government, which is totally different from any accounting that I may have matriculated in grad school and undergrad from the subject matter expertise at Georgia Municipal Association, the classes that I take, and from competent city managers, in which we have a very competent city manager that came highly recommended to the city from Georgia Municipal Association. And I'm going to say this. Yes, when we came into this city, mayor was a council member. I was on this council. Councilmember Rao was on this council, and Councilmember Gums. The 4 of us were here. Yes, we did transition from Fulton County 11.89 millage rate. We did transition that. from the county. But we also, as stated, had a deficit. We were operating in a deficit. We had to take out tax anticipation notes to pay our bills. We had our auditors tell us year after year that we had to make tough decisions as a new city because we were operating in in a deficit, and if anything catastrophic would have happened to our city, we would not have been able to pay our bills. We were also told that majority of our revenue, which was in the high 60s, was coming from property tax owners. It was a bad time because most of the properties were undervalued. Now we're in different times. And yes, this city council did have to make a decision based on what was given to us, because what we did not want to do is take away exemptions that residents were already getting before we became a city. Yes, I am saying, if you look at the 8 cities that surround the city of South Fulton, we give more exemptions than any other city. And when you give exemptions, residents, somebody has to pay for them. I respect the recommendation from our city manager. I know how we got here. I know all the facts. And what I'm simply saying, respectfully, it has nothing to do with our credentials and our education background. It has everything to do today with what the city manager, who is highly competent and highly educated, recommended to this body based on her analysis. And I respect that. The only thing I would ask for Ms. Subadan to do, if possible, but if you can't do it by the meeting this evening, I understand, is if we can get some type of chart adding the 5-year millage rate history or the rate. And again, I am proud of what we are as a city. We have been good stewards of our tax dollars. We have a $70 million surplus that we're going to put to good use. We have a lot of things that need to be done. We have an executive session matter that this council knows that we have to discuss. That's going to cost the city a lot of money. Thank you, Ms. Subadan.
Welcome.
I yield.
All right, the chair recognizes Councilwoman Pritchett for her second time.
Thank you again. Madam City Manager, as I review your budget presentation on page 12, it states for the 2024 proposed revenue budget that property taxes amounts to 33.85% of our general fund revenue. So would you confirm that that's correct? I'm looking at the presentation.
Right, let me pull it up. I don't want to go by memory. I believe the real taxes are 48% of our general fund budget.
Yes.
48%.
It says 48%, and then the percentage of revenue, it says 33.85.
Right, because that's taking all revenue sources into consideration. That sounds correct, yes.
Okay. So many times I hear from residents that feel that we are paying the majority of, that the burden of the city's tax revenue is just solely on residents. Would you characterize that as true or just based on the numbers that you have here?
So the city gets revenue from different sources. Some of them are special revenue. So for example, we have transportation special local option sales tax, otherwise called T-SPLOST. That factors into our total revenue categories, and but that's especially for transportation projects. Sales tax, and we also have that same situation with LOST, LOST, which is local option sales tax, which is a penny that anybody who procures goods and services in the city limits, that revenue comes to us. The LOST lost, we are able to use it to supplement our general fund budget, or our complete operating budget and capital budget. Some jurisdictions have SPLOST, special local option sales tax, which helps us with their capital, which is also, I think, sales taxes are one of the most equitable because you essentially, everybody pays. So when commuters or visitors or business persons use our infrastructure, they are contributing toward our cost by, when they buy gas or when they buy food or when they buy products and services at retail establishments. And studies have been done that shows that over 50% of sales tax comes from people who are outside your jurisdiction. So a large piece of our overall revenue, what you're looking at is all sources of revenue, because we're trying to be transparent and not, make sure that everybody understands there's general fund revenue and then there's special revenue, and some of the special revenue is designated. So to answer your question directly, having a diverse pool of funding is helpful because it means we don't have to raise our millage rate and overtax property owners in our community. Does that answer?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. I yield.
All right, seeing and hearing none other, we now get to one of my favorite points in all of the meetings. We have some very highly educated constituents as well, and now is the time to hear from all of you. So with that, I'm going to open the public hearing, and if you have questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms, please make your way to the mics. Who do you have registered already? Mr. Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 3 public comment cards for today's hearing. Just would like to remind the citizens that please, when you approach the mic, please state your name, your address, and your council district, and you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. We do have 2 microphones at the front of the stage, and you can approach either microphone. First speaker is Pamela Harris, followed by Connie Robinson and Marie Page Hargrave.
Pamela Harris, Montclair Estates, District 1. The council has consistently mentioned that seniors like myself pay little to no taxes. I don't have a master's or doctorate. However, I have a PhD in recognizing shady politics. We have single parents that can barely pay their bills. What relief is the city providing for them? Surely a single mother that can't pay her taxes, much less afford a gallon of milk, shouldn't have her home placed into a tax lien auction. According to Senate Bill 177, Act 431, a rollback of millage rates are acceptable when increases exist due to inflation. The effect of the pandemic has increased inflation to 8.2%, and the residents are feeling it. The price of milk has spiked 31%. Given these numbers, I've heard no discussion of decreasing the millage rate. Is the council discussing or considering a millage rate decrease based on inflation? It seems that there is only a handful of residents that should be yelling and screaming that our budget has gone from 65 million to over 200 million. A Georgia State study said that we should have been able to operate the city and have between $6 to $17 million reserve each year. By not lowering the millage rate to the rollback state, the City of South Fulton Council members are instituting a tax increase as defined by the state of Georgia. The $1 million difference between rollback rate and proposed millage rate should be returned to the taxpayers. Solution: shred the P cards, the WEX cards, and operate this city like the former city manager, Odie Donnell, and the former CFO, Frank Milazzi. Give the citizens of South Fulton a break. Give us a tax break.
For your comments, go ahead.
Good morning. Connie Robinson, Palmview Court, District 2. And on behalf of the City of South Fulton HOAs and Neighborhood Communities Advocacy Group, I just want to say that, first of all, it's unreasonable to have these 3 millage rate meetings within a 5 business day period and the approval all in the same time frame. Is that just to check a box and say we've met with the public 3 times? But in regards to the budget as it relates to the millage rate, okay, so I heard at the budget meeting, we already know you gave yourself a raise. You asked the department heads what did they want. You increased minimum wage. You added in a rainy day fund. We have $70 million in our coffers. And the citizens are saying, give us a break. You didn't ask us what we want. We're saying, give us a break. As Councilwoman Pritchett referenced, it's only $4.87 a month. Why can't you give that break to us as opposed to you receiving it? Our tax property values have increased, which means that you are receiving an increase on that. So why can't you give something back to us? So as Councilman Sebastian referenced, you know, the 2018 rate being the 4th highest at the time, and now and then in 2020 we became the 2nd highest. Why can't you give something back to us? You don't ask us what we want. We're trying to tell you, I'm hearing it, others are hearing it. We don't come up here and run down our resumes and tell you what our educational experience is, what our government experience is. We have plenty citizens that have high degrees and high education and even common sense. So we're asking you to take what we're asking into consideration and give us a break also. Thank you.
Marie Page Hargrave. I live in Oakley Township, which is District 7. And my question is simply, how does this increase in the rate affect the senior exemption in any way?
It does not.
If you could lower your mic, or you could just take it off if you want. If someone could help her, awesome.
Okay.
I think you had a question about senior exemptions.
Yes, how does this change in the tax rate and the millage rate affect the senior exemption, or if it does affect it in any way?
It doesn't.
All right, thank you. We're going to take all of your questions and comments, and then we're going to have the city manager and some members of council respond. But we've got that. How does that increase affect the senior exemption rate? Is there anyone else? Clerk Adams?
No, sir, that completes all of the submitted comment cards.
Before I go back to council, I see people lining up in the queue. I want to go first to Madam City Manager. Maybe take that first question and work backwards if you have any other comments about how this increase would affect the senior homestead exemption and just some of the other things that you've heard.
All right, changes in the millage rate do not affect the senior exemption. The senior exemption has been in place. Nothing you're doing here today impacts that. And everyone who makes a public comment that asks a question, we normally respond in writing. So we will follow up in writing as well.
Awesome, thank you so much. The chair recognizes Dr. Rao.
One of the things I I heard one of the questions from comment. It's not just senior exemptions. We also have, if a household, I think, has a household income of around $39,000 a year, they can also apply for exemptions. So we just got to make sure, and I know many of us have had town halls. I know it's been some with Commissioner Arrington to explain the exemptions. You have to apply for them. Again, that's a process that's separate from the city council, that's handled, separately, but you have to apply for them. And as the city manager already noted, none of this affects the exemptions that are already in place. So again, you do have to compare what's going on with other cities. Every city is different. We do have things that are not in place in other cities that already give you tax relief. In addition, when you're looking at your tax bill, there are 2 other entities, taxing entities that's on your bill. All that bill does not belong or come back to the city. You had a school board and you have Fulton County government. So you have to look at it as in its totality to have a true apples to apples comparison. Just wanted to share that information.
Thank you for that. The chair recognizes Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mayor. The point that I wanted to make when I talked about my education was just to say these simple things about explaining how things are structured in different cities, to me they're simple. It was not to compare anybody's education or imply that anyone is uneducated. I was talking about myself. Okay, so let me say that at first. The second thing is, we might be surprised as to what a little bit of money means to some people. It could be in the value. It could also be in the recognition to say, you know what, my city council sees me. They understand. When we talk about the millage rate coming into cityhood or into becoming a city, that is something that a lot of us went across this geography and trumpet that we were not going to unreasonably agree to taxing our citizens. We are doing a great job. Some things that were mentioned before about deficit that we had at the onset. Any business, any city that you're starting up will have those issues. And as I mentioned last meeting, my colleagues who have been here from day one, they've done a great job in getting us to this point. We're no longer in a startup mode. It was mentioned we have $70 million in reserve. That's an average of about $11.67 million per year. Again, great job by the day one team. We talked about having T-SPLOS in the current budget numbers. Well, you know what? I would just like to see the numbers presented without those, because maybe I'm beating a dead horse. So I would, Madam City Manager, I would like to see those numbers separated out, if possible, right? If you haven't presented them already. So again, for me, and hearing what one of the young ladies just said, if we're saving all this money, and yes, we know we have a lot of stuff to do. Yes, we're giving raises, which we should, to our employees. But there's also our citizens who have carried us thus far, and who we will depend on, and we will come to you in the future, because there's going to be something happening in the future, like Fulton County had to do. They rolled back and then they had to increase. That's government, according to how the economy is working, according to how cash flow is going, and according to your plans. At 12.899, we are not too far from the number that we would have to go back and ask for your vote if we have to go beyond that 13 plus millage rate that we're talking about. So all I'm saying is, I'm telling my colleagues, I'm asking them, do not dismiss the idea or the value that it'll mean for some citizens of even getting that $58 back. I yield.
The chair recognizes Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you. One of the reasons City Manager Subadan has recommended that we keep the millage rate the same is because we don't want to have to do what Fulton County is doing. And that's where we should be tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. because they rolled the millage rate back, and now they are taking it back and having to increase the millage rate to pay for services that are much needed. Subadan does not want us to have to come back to you. Ms. Subadan does not want us to have to come back to our residents in an embarrassing moment to say, we rolled this millage rate back, but now not only do we have to take it back, we're asking for an increase, but we have to catch up. That is why she has explained it will be prudent for us to leave it the same. Not only that, yes, there is a provision in the charter to say if we go over a certain millage rate that voters, you will have to vote. Well, that's why Ms. Subadan is saying, let's leave our millage rate the same, take the surplus and do the things that is needed so we would not have to come to you and ask you to vote on an increase of millage rate. And keep the same exemptions that we currently have that many other cities do not have. So I'm fine and comfortable with continuing to allow our seniors to age in place, not take away their exemptions, and they continue to pay minimum to zero taxes. So I just wanted to explain that we don't want to have to come to you and ask you to increase the millage rate. And we don't want to have to roll back $500,000, a half a mil, which equates to $2.4 million, so that everybody can get $4 back, $4 to $50 back in their tax revenue. That $4 to $50 equates to $2.4 million. Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much. And I'm actually going to amplify Councilwoman Willis's point. I like your new glasses. So obviously we're having a robust debate about the millage rate, but it is not just a debate for us alone to have. All of you get to be a part of it as well. Mr. Adams, would you go ahead and bring up that slide of the city's website? So we are going to have a vote on this millage rate hearing next Tuesday at 4 o'clock at our meeting. We're going to have a budget preview, and we're also going to have a millage rate vote, right? We're going to have a second reading and a vote on the millage rate. But before we, and I'm sorry, I'm hearing in my ear that we're voting this evening, but we're voting on Tuesday, correct?
That's correct. We recognize that we need an ordinance to approve the millage rate, not a resolution, so we need 2 readings. So there'll be a reading this evening and a reading next Tuesday.
Okay. So we're going to have the first read this evening at our 6 o'clock meeting. Just give me 1 second. And then next Tuesday at our 4 o'clock meeting, we'll have that vote. So we're going to have more chances for you all to give your feedback. One of the things that I always like is if you're going to give a critique, or if you're going to offer a problem, let's try to offer a solution. So I encourage everyone to visit the cityofsouthfultonga.gov. That's our website. We have it on the screen here. If you go right to the top, we got FY 2024 budget. If you'll go down to the FY 24 budget presentation, there's all kind of information you can find there, the calendar for all of these meetings that I'm talking about, as well as the numbers and the detail behind the numbers for all of the things that we're talking about. If you just hop down to slide number 19. But here's what I would ask for those of you all who are in favor of some sort of millage rate reduction or decrease, let's take a look at the budget together. Can you go one more? No, okay, no, that's good, that's good. You can see the expenditures by category, so that we know that a cut of $500,000 will be $2 or $3 million. There was a proposal that we saw today for a $7 million. These couple of $100 per household add up into the millions when you multiply them by 40,000. So for those of you all who are interested in seeing us cut this budget, I'm going to invite you all to propose some of those cuts. So we have 2 more, I said, hearings. We have this tonight here at 6 p.m. and next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Bring your suggestions for what departments we should cut, or what programs in those departments we should cut, so that we can have a serious community conversation. Because I think it's one thing to just talk about numbers and then talk about where the cuts will actually be. But that is what we're here to do. That is what this democratic experiment of America is, and us having these, there's a reason that these meetings are public, right? And that you all get to watch. It's not that you all just get to watch, you all get to make recommendations. So we look forward to hearing your recommendations over these next couple of meetings and being a part of this process. Thank you all so much for coming out, and we hope to see you again here soon at the Southwest Arts Center. And with that, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor,
I move to adjourn.
the city manager has an executive session item, and if we don't do it, today.
It's
now
at 6
we have
o'clock.
It's this evening.
to- Oh, it's at 6 o'clock?
Yeah. It's this evening.
Can we, city manager, can we do it now, so we won't have to do it at 6 o'clock? We could leave at 6 o'clock? I mean, after the meeting at 6 o'clock?
I'm prepared, but I'm not sure procedurally if that's appropriate. Can you call for it?
You can motion for executive session.
I guess if you motion for it, I'm prepared.
Okay, I move that we, go into executive session for real estate personnel and litigation.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to
Discussion.
just check in with our city attorney because it's not on the agenda for the special call meeting, but you're saying that's okay to amend the agenda of a special call meeting?
You can move for executive session, and then it'll just be ratified in your minutes next meeting.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded according to our city manager. I will, please carry the vote.
Discussion, Mr.
I'm sorry, there is discussion? The chair recognizes Councilman Sebastian.
Point of information. Mr. Clerk, can you read what's on the agenda for the 6 p.m. on the published agenda? Because I'm a bit confused as to what is happening right now.
Yes, the printed agenda for the 6 p.m. meeting was the millage rate presentation by the city manager, another millage rate public hearing, and then the first reading of an ordinance adopting the recommended millage rate of 12.899.
All right, thank you. And no executive session.
I'm sorry, an executive session was listed on that agenda.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will entertain a motion for this vote. I'm sorry, we have the motion for the vote. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
It's a roll call vote. Councilmember Rao?
Yes.
Councilmember Gomes? Councilmember Willis? Councilmember Sebastian?
No.
Councilmember Pritchard?
Yes.
That motion was approved 5-1. We are recessed at 11:04 p.m.
I entertain a motion for us to reconvene.
I move to reconvene from executive session.
Second.
Okay, calling for the vote.
This motion to reconvene, Councilmember Rao,
Yes.
Councilmember Gomes, Councilmember Willis,
Yes.
Councilmember Pritchett.
Yes.
We are reconvened at 12:03 p.m.
Was there any action taken in executive session?
There was no formal action taken in executive session that needs to be reported in the public forum.
Okay. At this time, I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Call for the vote.
This is a roll call vote to adjourn today's millage rate public hearing. Roll call, Councilmember Rao,
Yes.
Councilmember Gomes, Councilmember Willis,
Yes.
Councilmember Pritchett.
Yes.
We are adjourned at 12:04 p.m. and we will see you this evening at 6 p.m. for the final millage rate public hearing. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.